Hello, and welcome to the Dissing My Ability podcast. I am your host, Ken Meeker, certified professional coach and owner of Vitality Career Coaching. I am really happy to have today. David Snyder is an amazing individual who I've been trying to get on this show for a little while. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the audience to David Snyder. Welcome.
Why, thank you, Ken. Great to be here, and you make me sound like I'm a man in demand.
Well, you come very highly
Thank
recommended,
you.
so so people speak
Well,
very, very highly of you. So
thank you so much. No, great to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. If you would be able to share just a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how disability affects you on a personal level.
Sure. Well, currently, I live in Florida and been down here for, coming up on 20 years, I guess, and grew up in Pennsylvania. But I live just north of Tampa, Florida on the West Coast. I work for a software company. Technically, I'm a contractor for a software company, and I've been working from home for the last mostly 18, 19 years. I have three kids, ages 15, 14, and 10. So I'm a dad, 10-year-old, so I'm sick today. I am divorced. I was married for about 17 years. And let's see. So that's a little bit on my present situation. I have I'm a quadriplegic as a result of a spinal cord injury. Back in 1985, when I was 15, I was injured in a water skiing accident. I dove off my water ski and hit the bottom of the lake. And so technically it was a diving accident, but it's a lot more interesting to say it was a water skiing accident. So many people have had diving accidents, but not many have had water skiing accidents like that. Anyhow, so just goofing around and did something I had done many times before. In fact, have old black and white home movies of my older brothers doing the same thing. It was just something we did from time to time, and the water was really low that year. Gosh, the memory of it's very vivid. I won't go into all that detail, but my dad, who was driving the boat, he flipped me over. I was face down on the water for maybe, I don't know, seems like 10 minutes, but obviously it wasn't, or I wouldn't be here. Might have been a minute, a little over a minute, I'm not sure. But a lot of thoughts can go through your head in the span of a minute when you're when you can't flip over and you're staring at the bottom of the lake about 2 feet
Yeah,
in front of you.
that sounds absolutely terrifying.
But
Sounds terrifying.
I am wow. I'm grateful I can remember it. I guess because I've reflected on that a lot and learned from that experience. I guess. But anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole too much. But I broke my neck at C5, and long story short, I'm paralyzed from the chest down. So I have some of the muscles in my arms work pretty well. I can go fishing. I can write. I can do certain things, play horseshoes, whatever, as long as it's not too far of a throw. I don't have any hand function, so I can't voluntarily wiggle my fingers or anything like that. I can't voluntarily open and close my hands. That said, I've learned how to use my hands. So I've learned how to, basically, if you wedge a pen in my hand, if you will, not really wedge it in, but, hold a pen, I can write, I can type pretty well. I drive, and in a nutshell, that's where I'm at. So physically, so I've been, using in a wheelchair since I was 15. Finished high school, was really involved in high school, went to college, got a degree in education, specifically math, taught for a little bit in the classroom, and I have a much greater respect for teachers than I did before actually teaching in the classroom. That's a tough gig.
Yeah.
It really is. And so hats off to all teachers, at least the good ones.
Yeah, yeah.
And and I've been working. I've worked for some centers for independent living, so I've worked with various people with various different disabilities, and for about almost the past 20 years, have been working with some software companies, software startup companies. I'm not a programmer, but I do a lot of different computer type stuff, and have done lots of training and support type work. Wow, I could go on, but nobody wants to hear all the details. If you do,
Well,
email me.
it's a rich and full life. That's what I'm getting out of it.
Yeah, I have had a full life. It's had its ups and downs, and today's a great day, and I have, just like everybody else, I have my good days and I have my bad days, and
Yeah.
it's easy to be having a good day and sound like I'm on top of the world when I'm recording, being recorded for a podcast that hopefully lots of people are going to hear. But hey, I'm not always Mr. Chipper. I have
Yeah.
my days just like everyone else.
Yeah. So that leads me to a couple questions because there's a few things that you said in there that I really would like to circle back
Sure,
to.
let's go for it.
The first one is you have experienced disability pre-ADA and post-ADA since
Hmm.
your disability was in 1985, and that 37 years ago. So what would you say has been the biggest change in sort of, I guess, culture overall that how it's progressed over that time frame? Like with society, how they view disability, how you've seen others interact with you, how you've kind of seen that progress.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a tough question. I grew up in a real small town. Very little was wheelchair accessible, and even today, well, things are definitely more accessible. Well, right there. Not that I've been to my hometown very often in the past 20 years or so, but there's a lot more things accessible there now, and there's a lot of historic buildings that aren't accessible, that would be impossible to make accessible, quite frankly, just because these are old buildings. But a lot of the the stores and stuff are are more accessible. So I've definitely seen that progress just in my hometown of Ashland, Pennsylvania. Shout out to Ashland.
I don't know where
In
that is, sadly.
It
I'm not
is
even too familiar with Pennsylvania, so
it's
forgive me.
it's it's north of Harrisburg, about an hour north of Harrisburg.
Okay.
It's in the heart of the coal region,
Okay. That's where my
and
aunt lives, so I know where Harrisburg is.
hey, there you go. So, but I love Pennsylvania, but I enjoy the weather in Florida more. Gosh, the mm, pre ADA and post ADA. Gosh, I was. I think a variable that plays in there is my denial of my disability, if you will.
Okay.
And I don't want to sound like I know what I'm talking about from a psychological standpoint, but I was very much, I went through because, and I see this in a lot of people with spinal cord injuries or who experience, some sort of trauma that affects them, muscularly, if you will. That hey, I'm going to walk again. I don't want this life. I'm going to walk again. And people would be come up to me, oh, I'm praying for you. You're going to walk again. That someday you're going to jump up out of that wheelchair. I know you're going to. And sometimes that would make me angry
Hmm.
when people would do that. And I know though people meant it from a loving place with good intent, very good intent. And I use a power wheelchair now, but I used a manual wheelchair back then. And my friends, hey, if something wasn't accessible, my buddies got me there.
Hmm.
They picked me up, and somebody got the chair, and somebody got me, and they got me where we needed to go, even if it was in the middle of a field on the side of a hill on a Friday night. Don't tell my mom and dad.
I promise. I promise I won't.
But gosh, I'm really not getting to the answer here.
Well, it's a tough
But
question because, if that's a
yeah,
long period of time, and one of the things that I've noticed, because as I mentioned, earlier when we were off the recording, I have an aunt who she was in a wheelchair my whole life. She's unfortunately passed away now, but um, I saw how the struggles that she had with access and tried to get around, and just, where we lived. I'm originally from New Mexico. There was no public transportation system where she was at, so getting around was virtually impossible. At one point in time, she drove, but it didn't mean that stores were accessible, or the world wasn't really accessible to her. And something that I noticed is people treated her with pity unnecessarily because she was
mm,
very capable. So,
yep,
one easiest way to make her angry was to do something for her that she could do herself. And she didn't want, she wanted compassion, but not pity.
mm-hmm,
And I think that that's something that is maybe misunderstood with people, in society in general, where they don't have a disability, is sometimes it can feel, if you are the person who's receiving it, it can feel a little bit insincere.
yeah. And I also think that we, as people with disabilities, disabled people, whatever term you want to use, as a disabled individual, I know I'm guilty of misinterpreting.
Hmm.
And people might have been, they were being compassionate. And because of my state of mind or where I was in dealing with my disability, I interpreted it
Hmm.
as pity, but it wasn't
Ah,
meant that at all.
yeah,
Um, yeah, but I definitely don't want to be seen as being pitied. And you know, as you were talking there, I, I see one of the indirect effects of the ADA. Obviously, a direct effect is people with disabilities can get more places. I mean,
yeah,
I've definitely seen that. And the physical structures are more accessible, and more people are getting out and about. And one big thing I've noticed is so many people now come up to me like, oh, hey, I have a cousin, or oh yeah, my friend, or I saw this guy out with this van, and or this woman, who had a chair like yours. So more people are out living life.
hmm,
So and more non-disabled people are seeing more people with disabilities.
yeah, yeah,
And it's educating people. And man, I so many people I also feel want non-disabled people want to start a conversation. They want to learn more, but they don't know what to say. And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
another thing.
yeah. I think that's true.
I feel like I'm not approached sometimes because people don't know what to say and they don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's a
Oh
good
man,
point. That's a really good
and
point.
I want to wear this, make a shirt that says, "Don't be afraid to ask me the wrong thing."
That's,
Just
yeah,
start a
you're so right.
conversation.
You're so
And
right.
man, I didn't know what to say. And what's great is I love kids. Some mine get on my nerves sometimes, but I love them too. But I love the experiences I've had where I'm out in a store or somewhere out in public, and a little kid comes up and says, "Why can't you walk?"
Hmm.
Or "Why are you in a wheelchair, mister?"
Hmm. They're honest.
And
They're just
yeah,
honest. Yeah.
and what's great is if the parents are there, a lot of times they just they'll, I don't want to say reprimand,
But yeah,
but
they're like, hey, don't ask that. That's not
they'll
appropriate or
yeah, they'll
whatever. Yeah.
react in horror. And I just say, oh wow, I don't mind that at all. I wish more adults would.
Yeah.
I wish I wish more adults would come up and say that, and say the blunt things rather than nothing at all.
Yeah.
And if I can't handle that, if some, let's say, hey, some dude comes up and says, "Hey man, what happened to you? What's your problem?"
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
received that one, and that's a hard one. That's a
Yeah.
hard one to take.
Yeah. Because that's the intent, the what's behind, somebody's, what's your problem? There's so much underneath that statement
Right.
that that's a very intense microaggression is what I would consider that one.
But even
But kids
so,
aren't like that though. But kids aren't like that. They
oh
just don't
no,
know.
not at
They don't
all.
know. And they're just curious. And that's what I love kids in the exact same way. They're curious. And I don't know
Hmm.
why, for some reason, as as us old people, why we try to stifle that curiosity. Because it's
And
harmless. They're just
it is,
curious.
it is.
They're
And
just curious.
I've educated so many kids just, at the mall, wherever, at the park, because they asked me a blunt question.
Mhm.
And it led to, if their parents were there, in a lot of cases, it's led to, educating the parents as well and getting into, 10, 15-minute conversations with the parents. Maybe even making some friends in some cases, not any that I can think of. But, even with adults, if somebody comes up to me and says, oh, what's wrong with you? If they say it the right way,
Yeah.
I can, and depending on the scenario, hey, if I'm out having a beer somewhere and, somebody comes up and says, oh, hey, what's wrong with you? And I know, oh, I know what they're asking. And I may prefer that they would ask it a different way.
Yeah.
And I might not always handle it as well as I would handle it right now. But bottom line is, I wish I I wish people knew what to say, or
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wish people knew that really there's nothing wrong for you to say, and if I don't like you asking me, that's kind of more my problem
Thank
than
you for saying
yours.
that. Thank you for saying that because that's what I tell people is you could ask me and they tell me, "Can I ask you a question?" And I'm like, "Of course you can. You can ask me anything you want. It's
Right?
up to me
Yeah.
whether I answer." But don't deny yourself that opportunity to ask the question. How you ask it absolutely matters. But,
Right.
intent is always important. But I also see it, because I don't drive. I shouldn't be driving, but I get asked all the time by rideshare drivers. I tell them, well, I'm glad you're driving and not me. And it just leads to a conversation because it's always
Yeah.
an opportunity to educate. Always. And half the time it's, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, don't be. Don't be sorry. I get around just fine. Plus, I help keep you employed.
Right.
Things like that. But it always, I view every person that I encounter as an opportunity to just engage in a conversation that's constructive to where they don't. The last thing I want is somebody else to view my disability as a limiting condition in terms of that I can't do something. Of course, there's things I can't do, but that's true for everybody, regardless of disability or not.
Exactly.
And so, like you said, I just wish people would have that. They wouldn't be afraid to ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
It-
And we're early on, we learn to not ask questions.
yeah.
How many times was I sitting in class and I had the right answer, but I was afraid I was going to be made fun of if I was wrong.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
and I think we learn, don't ask questions, and I don't
So
know,
we stop.
maybe I'm
Yeah,
going
no, I
too
think you're
deep,
right.
right?
I think you're I no, I don't think you're right. I think you're right. You hit the nail right on the head there. We're afraid of answering the question wrong, in school and whatnot because
Mm-hmm.
of all of the, ramifications of that. And then, plus there's, a lot of adults. I've always like to ask, why. I think why is generally one of the most important questions.
Oh yeah.
And I like it when kids do the same thing to me. I don't want to stifle their curiosity. If I can't answer the question, I can't answer it. But if I can, why wouldn't I? I don't try to stop anybody else from doing it. It's just I think kids, like you said, are much more inclined to ask. Like if I'm using my cane or any sort of mobility device, they think it's cool. They want to know what's going on.
Right.
They love it.
Oh, kids
Um,
love my chair, and let alone how I drive. Wow, that's cool, mommy. I want one of those.
exactly.
you know.
And that's how great is it that a kid that can see some piece of technology or something that enables somebody with a disability to have access as cool. We need more of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what we should want the world to be
And,
like instead of trying to stifle that in other people.
and a minute or two or even 15 seconds, however short, however long of time that I spend with a kid or an adult for that matter, answering their questions, you don't know how much impact that little bit can
Yeah,
have.
absolutely.
And 20 years down the road, that that little kid that I explained something to, who knows? They might remember that, or remember the conversation, and give them an idea about how to solve a problem,
Yeah.
or when they're a lawmaker or a business owner or just somebody living in the world, they've learned something from me that they may apply somewhere else.
Yeah, they'll think about
And
you and wait, hey, I remember that guy and he was in
yeah,
a wheelchair and hey, how would he get into this room or whatever, that kind of thing. It's always an opportunity to create greater access and awareness and all that kind of stuff. So why not have those conversations?
and even if they would become disabled themselves,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it could help there. And I know, heck, I remember people, or people that I may have seen on TV, even back in the 70s or early 80s, who had some sort of disability that, I can think back how that formed my, or may have helped me in my adjusting to
Hmm.
life with a disability.
Hmm. Yeah, because you and I, we have acquired disabilities, mine more
Hmm.
recent, of course. But that adjustment period, because you were still a teenager at the time, how did you, I guess, address it? How did you move? Because I don't think we don't get
Wow.
over it, but we move
Yeah.
through it. And that concludes this first part of the conversation I had with David Snyder here on the Dissing My Ability podcast. I hope you will tune in next week where we will conclude this two-part conversation with the excellent David Snyder. I am your host, Ken Meeker. This is the Dissing My Ability podcast. Please subscribe, like, and share, and hope you will tune in next week for the rest of this awesome conversation.